This video is kindly sponsored by Squarespace. For any aspiring content creators or business owners, Squarespace is the perfect platform for you to get up and running with your own website. No coding skills needed, instead select from dozens of pre-built templates which you can customize as much or as little as you want using simple, easy-to-use drag and drop tools. You can have a fully fledged blog, video hosting site, or online store up and running within minutes. Previously, I talked about Squarespace's ability to host videos from every major popular video hosting site like YouTube and Vimeo. But if you don't want to worry about the pesky algorithm or unjust copyright claims, then Squarespace can host videos natively on your new site. And once you're done designing, Squarespace can provide a free, custom protected URL and domain name which can help your site reach the right audience. Follow the link in the description to start making your own website with your own domain name and use the promo code RowanJColeman for 10% off your first purchase. Thank you once again to Squarespace for helping me keep the lights on over here. And now, on with the video. Hello everybody and welcome to a very special video. As you may have seen, this channel recently passed 100,000 subscribers. This is a huge milestone to cross and pretty impressive for a channel which started out as an awkward teenager trying to rip off the Nostalgia Critic. Yes, really. But not only am I extremely proud of how far the channel has come, I'm also extremely thankful to you guys for sticking around for so long and supporting what I do. It's thanks to you guys I've been able to make this my full-time job, which has allowed me the time and resources to develop some exciting side projects, which you'll be hearing about in the new year. For now though, seeing as how I'm in the thick of working on my Red Dwarf retrospective, I thought I'd throw together a fun Q&A video. First up, we have Earl Grey Trekkie, who asks, what do you enjoy most about creating a video? I imagine there's a certain satisfaction to imagining a concept and slowly seeing it come together. It's an art form just like playing a musical piece, singing, etc. Expressing your opinions and creating a receptive community must be rewarding. It is highly rewarding. Ever since I started making these in-depth retrospective reviews, I have honestly loved making stuff for my channel. It's easily the best thing I've ever made on here, and I'm very proud of them. In terms of what I enjoy the most, it's really delving into the behind the scenes and discovering the creative processes leading up to these films and shows I love so much. I don't just mean when, where, and how it was shot, but how the ideas were generated, how they evolved, and why, etc. Oftentimes I've made some really interesting discoveries about what the original plan for something was and how it changed and so on. I find all of that really fascinating and inspiring at the same time. Miles Mulholland asks, you've really hit your stride with your retrospective series. Each episode, whether it's Superman, B5 or Trek, etc., has been exceptional. Will you be looking to continue this series and perhaps move more into documentary making? Keep up the good work. So I've effectively made the retrospectives my main output on this channel right now. In between the big multi-part feature-length ones, I'll be doing stuff like the Superman series or Paul Verhoeven movie series, as well as some standalone ones. There will be the occasional video essay here and there, but the retrospectives will be the core content on this channel from now on. In terms of making documentaries, it's crossed my mind, but it's not something I'd really pursue as a career. Michael J.W. asks, what is your earliest memory of any science fiction show or movie, or both? Are there any other genres you really enjoy? What's your favourite non-sci-fi show? I literally couldn't tell you what the earliest memory is. As I've said before, things like Star Trek have just always been on for as long as I can remember. When I was growing up, I think it was BBC Two had this really weird block of programming at one point, which was like Star Trek, Thunderbirds, Captain Scarlet, and some cartoon show altogether. So I was glued to the screen for all of that stuff. But I also remember my parents taping Ray Harryhausen films and Battlestar Galactica off the TV, and my neighbour lending us a VHS box set of the original Star Wars trilogy. I do have vague memories of experiencing Farscape, Babylon 5 and Stargate and so on, but I got properly into those when I was a little older. In terms of these super early memories, my childhood was like Star Trek and Ray Harryhausen seemingly on a perpetual loop in my house. I don't really have a favourite genre outside of sci-fi. I kind of enjoy everything. In terms of a favourite non-sci-fi show, I've been really keen on Succession recently, and I take any opportunity to sing the praises of The Last Kingdom. But honestly, we could be here for days if I listed everything. Andrew asks, What do you think is the most Star Trek-like series that isn't Star Trek? The Orville, The Expanse, Babylon 5? I mean, The Orville is an obvious one, but it's so clearly and deliberately making an effort to replicate the Next Generation, it pretty much goes without saying. However, I have been catching up on For All Mankind recently, which is just phenomenal. I just finished Season 2 recently, and it's easily some of the best TV I've ever seen. In fact, Jesse Gender already did a great video about the Star Trek-ness in For All Mankind, so check that out if you haven't seen it, but you can easily view For All Mankind as an unofficial Star Trek prequel series. Cable Royson asks, I'm interested in your overall creative process. What software and editing tools do you use? Did you go to film school or learn it on your own? Do you re-watch the episodes before you do the videos? How do you watch the episodes? Blu-ray or streaming or both? Where do you find the behind the scenes info? So, first of all, I use HitFilm to edit my videos. There is a free version which you can then upgrade. It basically has the same layout as Premiere, and I find it highly intuitive and surprisingly powerful when it needs to be. Secondly, I didn't go to film school, but I did study film and TV, first at Edinburgh College and then at Napier University, but I was already editing and making things before that. Film courses are great for honing your technical craft. I certainly learned a lot of the nitty-gritty technical stuff on those courses. Where I found my courses lacking was in developing one's own creative voice. That's something I did have to figure out by myself, which is why I kept this channel going through college and uni. In fact, if you're an aspiring filmmaker, I'd highly recommend just starting a YouTube channel. Simply giving yourself a schedule and making regular videos has made me a far better editor, writer, voiceover artist, etc. I've gotten just as much, if not more, out of doing YouTube as I did on the film and TV courses. Thirdly, I do make sure to re-watch things before I make videos on them. I think it's quite dangerous to try and make an informed review from memory alone. For example, I'm really glad I rewatched things like Enterprise and Nemesis before making those retrospectives, because my opinions on them changed slightly when they became more fresh in my mind. When I'm rewatching them, I usually have them on Blu-ray or DVD. In fact, making these videos is a pretty good excuse to splash out on the box sets, and it means I can actually write down buying Blu-rays as a business expense on my tax returns, which is pretty nice. And finally, where do I find the behind the scenes information? Basically anywhere and everywhere. The reason I like getting Blu-rays is because there's often a lot of behind the scenes content on there already, but I also read books, articles, fan wikis, I watch documentaries, you name it. Mark Braun asks, first of all, congratulations, this is well earned, you do great work, all the luck to you in the future. Thank you, Mark. I especially love your in-depth retrospectives. Are there any future retrospective plans after Red Dwarf, or maybe smaller side pieces in between? So, as I said, the retrospectives are now the main thing on this channel, which means naturally there will be plenty more after Red Dwarf. I have a rather lengthy list of multi-part series on specific franchises and standalone movies as well. The ones I get frequently asked about the most are Stargate, Farscape and Battlestar Galactica, so to clear this up, yes, I will be covering those. If you go to my Twitter profile actually, I pinned a tweet showing some of the things I'll definitely be covering, so have a look there. I also keep getting asked about more obscure things like Blake 7, Sliders, and Sequest, among other things. Unfortunately, I haven't seen any of those, but when I do get around to watching them, maybe I'll do a retrospective on them, we'll see. Reality Reimagined asks, what is your favourite and least favourite Star Trek film score? Man, this is a difficult one. There isn't a single bad Star Trek film score in my opinion. Every time I try to name one as a definitive favourite, I think of like 5 more which I just love. So I often just fall back on saying Star Trek the Motion Picture because I still think of the Jerry Goldsmith theme as the Star Trek theme, and that's where it originated. But James Horner, Michael Giacchino, David McCarthy, Cliff Idleman, it's all amazing. If I had to choose a least favourite, it's probably The Voyage Home. And again, that's not to say it's bad. Leonard Rosenman's score for that movie is absolutely wonderful. But like that movie in general, it just comes down to personal taste. It's not my preferred take on Star Trek, and it's the score I've listened to the least. But again, I want to stress, it's not bad. John Davies asks, when you first started the channel, did you know exactly what kind of content you wanted to produce, or have you let this evolve over time? Also, I'm a massive fan of classic Doctor Who, and was wondering if this is a subject you'd cover for future videos. My channel's content has definitely evolved. As I said in the intro, I started out as a sort of nostalgia critic-y character because at the time that angry review format was all the rage. That quickly fell apart because it was bad, but also because those videos got copyright claimed up the ass. If you go way back on this channel, you'll find a bunch of videos where I'm just kind of desperately trying all sorts of things like reviews and vlogs and podcasts, lists, trailer breakdowns, etc. None of it really worked until I started doing Star Trek reviews, and from there came B5, BSG, Stargate and Farscape reviews, top 10 episode stuff, lore evolution and so on. My recent shift to retrospective reviews was mostly motivated by improving on my earlier work. These older videos really don't hold up for me in any way. The editing, the voiceover, the actual analysis, I just cringe at it now. It took me a long time to settle into making stuff I was really creatively satisfied with and was successful on the site. Like, this channel has been around for over 7 years now, but it's only become my full-time job in the past 2 years, so that should paint a picture for you. With regards to classic Doctor Who, I'm less familiar with that stuff, but if you want an in-depth retrospective series on all of Doctor Who, I cannot recommend Clever Dick Films' work enough. I basically have no need to do a Doctor Who retrospective series because this guy just knocked it out of the park. Brilliant series of videos and actually a big inspiration for my own Star Trek retrospective series. Even if you're not into Doctor Who, I'd still say watch these, they're that good. David Bosco asks, I really love your content, and since you're doing a Superman retrospective, can you do a review of 1984's Supergirl? I think I will at some point, yeah. I only gave it a brief mention in my Superman movie series retrospective, but I'll probably make a standalone Supergirl retrospective too at some point. The Goji Shay 1991 asks, knowing that you're a big fan of the Mass Effect franchise, who are your favourite characters from the games? This is another really tough one. Obviously Garrus is my boy, like he's everyone's, but my usual team is Garrus and Liara. I really love Liara's character arc throughout those games, how she goes from a naive but capable archaeologist to this badass underworld crime boss, and eventually the Shadow Broker. I think it's really awesome. Honestly though, Mass Effect is just a gluttony of great characters, so I'd be here all day if I went through all of my favourites. Loggers109 asks, having found out your appreciation for Doctor Who, do you have a particular favourite era of the show, and have you sampled any of the Big Finish audio dramas? From what I've seen of the classic era, I've really enjoyed the Troughton, Pertwee, Tom Baker and later Sylvester McCoy eras the most. In the modern show, the Eccleston and Tennant eras have been my favourites. I have listened to a few Big Finish audio dramas and really enjoyed the Paul McGann stuff, especially Chimes at Midnight. In fact, if you're into audio dramas, I'd highly recommend The Sojourn from friend of the channel Space Doc. I actually wrote one of the episodes in Volume 2. It's very Battlestar Galactica meets Master and Commander. I'm not being sponsored to say this, by the way. Basically, it's about an expedition into unexplored space from a star cluster suffering a great famine, and lo and behold, it turns out the expedition isn't alone in this new region of space. So, jump over to Space Doc or the Sojourn channel to find out more because, seriously, it's really good. Destroyer of Worlds asks, what science fiction series do you feel deserves or is in need of a modern remake/reboot? I personally feel that Space Above and Beyond would likely find more of an audience now, but that's just my opinion. I would agree that Space Above and Beyond was ahead of its time and probably would be more successful now. However, I think Battlestar Galactica and The Expanse really picked up the baton from that show. Personally, I don't really want any remakes or reboots. I'm always a champion of original works instead. Like, yeah, you could probably make a really good modern version of something like Space 1999, but I just think, make something new instead. Cyberpup22 asks, have you put any thought into what you're going to do after YouTube? Just curious, you could almost do your own pop culture sci-fi documentary show somewhere. I've said before that I don't plan on doing YouTube full time after I've turned 30. I love this as my job right now, but my real career goal is to make movies. I was actually in production of a feature horror movie I was directing a wee while ago, which was unfortunately shelved due to the pandemic. I'm working on something else which I'll announce in the new year. The plan is to eventually rename and hand over this channel to other content creators, with myself taking on more of a producer role. I'll never shut down this channel or step away from YouTube entirely, but making movies is really where my passion lies. Eminem asks, what are your thoughts on anime? Have you thought of doing any particular reviews on them? I've seen a fair few anime movies, but not too many shows. And I know by even entertaining this question, I just opened the floodgates to people recommending me about 100 anime shows in the comments, but there you go. But I've really enjoyed things like Cowboy Bebop and Space Battleship Yamato. I have considered doing retrospectives on those shows at some point, as well as movies like Akira and Ghost in the Shell. Outside of that though, I have no plans to cover anything else anime-wise. Junebug Films asks, what are your thoughts on the Barsoom series, and would you ever consider doing a retrospective on that book series? So, I've only ever seen the John Carter movie, which I actually really like. I think it has quite an unfair reputation. However, I haven't gotten around to reading the books. When it comes to doing retrospectives on books, I have considered it, but I don't know what I would do for the visuals of such a video. Doing things on camera isn't really my style, and there's only so much concept art in the world, so I don't know. But if I think of a way to do it in the future, then yeah, I could see myself covering the Barsoom series one day. Yggdrasil Illustrated asks, what do you consider the holy grail of your DVD Blu-ray collection? What sci-fi novel or comic book do you think should be adapted for the small screen? The holy grail of my DVD Blu-ray collection. Garth Marenghi's Dark Place. It actually is a really good release. If you've ever been curious about Dark Place, just buy the DVD. Don't fuck around trying to find it online, just buy it. It'll be worth it. In terms of pure image quality, I've been really impressed by the 4K releases of The Matrix and Superman the movie. They both look gorgeous, especially The Matrix because it has a new color grade which looks stunning with HDR technology. I do own the Director's Edition 4K of Star Trek The Motion Picture, but I haven't watched it yet. And I'm really keen on the new 4K Middle-earth box set. Although I'm not a big fan of the Hobbit movies, I'm gonna get the box set purely because it has all the bonus material this time. That was a real disappointment for me with the first 4K release of The Lord of the Rings. So the fact that the bonus material is included in this new box set, plus all the bonus material for The Hobbit, plus the theatrical and extended versions of all 6 movies, yeah, that's looking like holy grail material to me. In terms of novels or comics which could be adapted for the small screen, I do think the Lost Fleet series can make a good TV show, and I'm really surprised actually that Alfred Bester's work hasn't had much in the way of adaptations. Those are just the ones that spring to mind anyway. Verity Shush Variety asks, you've alluded to the spin-off novels of Star Trek many a time, and have naturally discussed science fiction novels in general many a time. Have you ever considered pursuing the Wilderness Years Doctor Who spin-off novels such as the Virgin New Adventures, BBC 8th Doctor Adventures, or a personal favourite, Faction Paradox? I am curious about the Wilderness Years stuff, yeah. I'm currently collecting the SF Masterworks series, so I still have a lot of stuff to get through book-wise, but yeah, I'd definitely check some of that out. I'm open to recommended titles if you have any. BH asks, what is your favourite episode of Star Trek Lower Decks so far? I'm actually still to catch up on Season 3. I've had a busy few months, so I haven't kept up with any of the new Star Trek stuff, which has just come out. It's really difficult for me to choose, though, because I just think Lower Decks is awesome. If I had to pick like a top 3, I'd say Crisis Point, I, Excretus, and First Contact. Those for me struck the perfect balance of humour, fan service, action, and drama. James Southby asks, would you consider doing a Star Wars film retrospective series, or are you less of a fan? I do like Star Wars, and have even made a few Star Wars videos in the past, but nobody watched them, so I stopped making them. I don't think I'd ever do a retrospective on the original trilogy, mainly because the making of story of those movies has been covered to death. Same with The Lord of the Rings, the behind the scenes anecdotes are so well known they've almost become mimetic, so I don't really know what I could add that folk don't already know. The Star Wars prequels, on the other hand, maybe. I still think there's a lot of misconceptions and myths going about with regards to the making of those movies. I also think the insane fan backlash to them is still relevant to this day, so maybe I do the prequels one day, but no promises. THC Dreams 654 asks, do you like any fantasy settings outside of your sci-fi expertise? I am a big Lord of the Rings fan. I also really like the Conan books in the Hyborian Age. However, in terms of fantasy settings, Avatar The Last Airbender is simply remarkable. Really innovative and imaginative. Some of the ways bending has been integrated into that world is incredibly clever, and I think it's just a really unique and special setting. Actually, question for you, should I do a retrospective on Avatar The Last Airbender? Nick Wilcox asks, will you do a review covering all the Marvel films? So fun fact, I did do a review series covering all the Marvel movies almost immediately after my original series of Star Trek reviews. Thing is, nobody watched them, and by that I mean some of them didn't even get like 200 views, so I just deleted all of those videos, and to be honest, no, I don't have any interest in covering any Marvel stuff these days. Shannon Bailey asks, what are your thoughts on comic book movie fatigue? I understand it, but personally I haven't totally succumbed to it. I have pretty much lost all interest in the MCU. I watched Spider-Man Far From Home, didn't really like it. I watched Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, thought it was okay. I don't really care about any of the other shows or movies. I am partial to some of the DC stuff, mostly because I prefer that universe and am a bigger fan of those characters. Even though it's way messier, I do appreciate that the DC movies have some actual variety. There are writers and directors putting their own unique spins on these characters, which, for me at least, keeps things fresh. I'm certainly excited to see what the new Superman movie turns out to be. Jack McGinn asks, favourite sci-fi franchise besides Star Trek? Babylon 5, hands down. I love rewatching that show, and I think it's a really fantastic universe, which is a nice segue into the next question actually, where James asks, why do you think Babylon 5 was never able to have a successful spin-off? I actually think, had Crusade gotten the support it needed from the network, it would have probably been pretty great. I thought the premise was the next logical follow-up to Babylon 5. It had several really good episodes and a great ensemble cast. It's just a shame it was basically sabotaged by the TNT execs. Legend of the Rangers I don't think was quite the right direction to go in for a spin-off, and The Lost Tales simply didn't have the budget it needed. I think there's definitely room in that universe for more shows. It's not like there was never a successful spin-off due to a lack of material. Oftentimes it was external factors which brought down those other projects, so I suppose the short answer as to why it never got a successful spin-off, it really comes down to bad luck in my opinion. Secret Crisis, the Bronze Age of DC Comics asks, did you ever worry that no one would take your opinions seriously, let alone agree or disagree with them? I couldn't give a shit. Ali Al-Muhanna asks, how would you write a movie? On my laptop. But if you're interested in my creative process, I'd recommend 3 videos I did a while back called How to Write Science Fiction. They didn't get many views, and it's true we do ramble on a bit, but there's some good stuff in there I reckon. Enjoy Sack Lunch asks, how you doing? I'm great. Trevor Grace asks, we all know that Galaxy Quest is the best Star Trek movie, so is Spaceballs the best Star Wars movie? I do like Spaceballs, but I'm actually not a huge fan of it. The internet has sort of memed all the best bits from that movie, but there's a lot of other stuff which falls pretty flat. Blazing Saddles is still Mel Brooks' best film in my opinion. Ivan J asks, what is your hottest Star Trek take? I think the episode The Inner Light is good, but I don't think it's great. I shall say no more. Tracker57 asks, when compiling your retrospectives, what did you find was the easiest to research and what have you found the most difficult? Star Trek was by far the easiest. The making of every show and movie has been exhaustively documented. The trouble was deciding what to leave out. The most difficult was probably Superman 3. There just isn't that much behind the scenes info out there, at least not interesting info anyway. That was one I really thought about padding out somehow, but ultimately what's in the video is most of what's out there. Genesism asks, can you describe what the journey has been like for you? Perhaps things like low points when you didn't want to continue, but X event lifted you back up, unique memories that relate to your time making videos, unforgettable moment while recording, meet and greets, etc. I've definitely had my ups and downs doing this. Like a lot of people who pursue careers in the creative industries, for the longest time it's simply a hobby, but it's a hobby you have to treat like a job. which means it's often the same hours as a job, the same workload as a job, yet there is little to no monetary reward, which can be pretty tough. Combined with battling YouTube's algorithm, putting up with hate comments and so on, I've certainly suffered a lot of stress and burnout and all the usual things YouTubers talk about. But for me, YouTube is and always has been a means to an end. This is a stepping stone to my career as a filmmaker, and because that goal, that dream really, is so worth it, that's always been the thing which has pushed me to soldier on, even when it was difficult, and sticking with it has already paid off in huge ways. The fact I'm fortunate enough to be self-employed, to be able to make my own schedule and have enough time to work on some movie scripts or collaborate on other projects, or even get discovered through my YouTube work, that's something I'm incredibly thankful for. I know not everyone who wants to work in film is that lucky, and so I'm really thankful for that. And this coming year is especially exciting because it feels like so many of these goals I've had for so long are finally within reach, but as I said, I'll make those announcements when the time comes. Mark Tonna asks, what are your thoughts on each of the films in the Star Wars sequel trilogy? Opinions on the Star Wars sequel trilogy have been done to death on YouTube, so I'll just make this quick. So I'll simply say, thumbs up for The Force Awakens, 2 thumbs up for The Last Jedi, and a thumbs down for Rise of Skywalker. Matthew Maloney asks, what is your favourite behind-the-scenes moment that impacted what we saw on screen? I don't know if this is exactly what you mean, but learning all the stuff about Christopher Reeve following his accident was really something special. I could only capture like a tiny part of his legacy in my Superman Returns video, but genuinely what an incredible man. Gregory Breen asks, congratulations on 100,000 subs. Thank you, Gregory. How has working on the long retrospective videos changed your process and goals for the channel? It's certainly more creatively satisfying. As I mentioned before, I'm really proud of how the retrospective videos have turned out. Even though they're often more work, it's absolutely worth it. It's amazing that these videos that I enjoy making the most are also the most successful thing on the channel. I know not everyone on YouTube is that fortunate. And I tell you, the idea of making another, like, fucking Star Trek phaser designs ranked worst to best is soul-crushing. So I'm glad I don't have to do that anymore. Doing the Star Trek retrospectives really taught me how to streamline the production of these kinds of videos and make them on a regular basis without, like, killing myself. That's how I've been able to make them the core content of this channel. You also may have noticed a lot of Squarespace ads in my recent videos, and that's because I recently entered into a long-term sponsorship deal with them, which is obviously a huge boon to my income, and because of that, it's afforded me huge creative freedom with these videos. So even though the Superman retrospectives didn't do as well views-wise, for example, I can now afford to step outside my usual wheelhouse and expand my creative horizons, so to speak, and talk about other movies and shows which I really, really love, even though they're not guaranteed to do that well views-wise. Which, to me, is worth a minute of telling people about a service which I actually do use. Regular Jim asks, are there any science fiction comic books you really like? And would you consider covering comics in the way you've covered film and TV? I've recently been rereading a bunch of Judge Dredd stuff, and honestly I forgot how good Judge Dredd is. The recent graphic novel line of Essential Judge Dredd is really great, and if you want to get into Judge Dredd, that's the perfect place to start. Other than that, I've also been slowly collecting the Valerian and Laureline books. The movie certainly had problems, but it got me interested enough to check out the comics, and they're really good. I'd highly recommend giving them a read. In terms of covering comics, it is easier than covering novels, as there is some visual material I can use. However, when it comes to covering written material in that way, there's the behind-the-scenes element to consider. The reason I love going into that for movies is because I'm a filmmaker myself, and so I'm really interested in learning about the writing and filmmaking and visual effects and so on, but with written work it's just like they sat down and wrote it. But I won't say never, I'll say maybe. And finally, these last few questions all kind of fold into one, and I have similar answers for them. So RuneWolf25 asks, What is your dream project? And if you could make a Superman movie, what would it be about, and who would you cast as Clark, Lois, etc.? Also, Nathan Smurthwaite, Michael Trimmer, and Luke Baxter each ask, what would you do if you could make a Star Trek show and or movie? The dream project is an original movie idea of mine. I've written the first draft of the screenplay, and I even have a rough idea of how I'd make it, but I'm not going to tell you about it. First of all, you wouldn't really know what it is without me spoiling it all, and secondly, I fully plan on making it one day, so you'll find out eventually. In terms of a dream franchise project, Star Trek and Superman are hands down the ones I would do in a heartbeat if given the offer. But I'm also not going to tell you about those ideas either. I do have ideas for them, I have written them down, but I'm not going to say what they are on YouTube because I want them to get made one day. I know it's a very long shot, and in all likelihood you'll never see my Superman movie or my Star Trek movie or whatever, but making movies is my chosen career, and so even though there's like an infinitesimally small chance I ever actually get to make them, it's still a chance. So if all goes well, you'll find out what they are when they come out, but if I know for sure they'll never ever happen, then I'll probably explain in some long-winded rant on a podcast one day. Thank you for watching. If you like my videos, be sure to like, subscribe and share, and make sure to hit the bell icon to stay up to date with all of my new uploads. If you want to help the channel grow, join my Patreon or YouTube members using the links down below. There you can see videos early as well as some exclusive content. Speaking of which, I'd like to quickly thank all of my patrons and members who are now appearing on screen. Have a good one, and as always, live long and prosper.